Welcome back to another OnLab tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about reverb, and specifically we're going to tackle three different topics or questions that we get on a somewhat regular basis. Number one, serial versus parallel. What is it? What are those things, and how do they work? We'll get to that. Um, Number two, how do I know what type of processing to apply for the different sounds, if I'm going to be using serial or parallel. And then number three, what the heck does reverb sound like? And this is the important question. This could change the way that you use and apply reverb in all of your projects moving forward, if you're not already using this little secret. So it's really not a secret. It's a best practice. We should really refer to it as that. All right, so for example, I have grabbed three different samples or loops from the Logic Pro library of sounds. You do not need Logic Pro to follow along with this. If you do happen to be using Logic Pro, you can use these specific sounds and follow along using the same exact sounds and the same exact reverb settings and everything, and everything will be glorious. For those of you who are not using Logic, fear not. This is universally applicable no matter what program you're using, no matter what kind of music you produce, okay? All right, so without further ado, we're going to talk first about serial versus parallel, okay? And serial is also referred to as inline sometimes, or on track by a handful of people still. Basically, this just means that you're going to apply reverb directly to the sound that you want reverb applied to. It's really that simple. Parallel processing, parallel reverb, means that you're actually going to send your original sound to an auxiliary channel, and on that channel, on that secondary channel, you're then going to apply reverb, and then add it back to the original sound. So that's where the word parallel is coming from, because you've got two tracks working in tandem, and then you're just dialing in a specific amount of reverb effect to the original sound. Okay. So for those of you who are familiar with New York compression, parallel compression, this is the same exact idea. Okay, parallel processing of all kinds works the same exact way. All right, so the next question here in our list of things to tackle for this lesson is how do you know what types of sounds are going to be treated with what type of reverb? Okay, that's a good question. It's a fair question, and specifically, what type of reverb? That's a big, broad, loaded question, because no two sounds are the same. Of course, you're going to have like a go-to type of reverb for the different major types of sounds that you commonly use in your music, and that's fine. But finding which one works best for your sounds and your music specifically is going to be a trial that you're going to have to get through yourself. Okay, what we're going to discuss here today are generalizations. Okay, just general guidelines. Okay, so for instance, if you have a sound that you want to just fill with not fill with, but transform into being like an atmospheric presence in your mix. Okay, that is a good indicator that you may want to use serial reverb on that sound. Okay, now a good example of that I think most of you might be familiar with would be some dub techno sound, or deep, like immersive ambient type sound. You'll often hear this in other types of music other than techno, but dub techno has a certain flavor, a certain style, and character that's pretty well known. So that's why I chose this. It's just a simple little chord pluck progression here. Okay, so that detuned, slightly warbly, like minutely modulated chord stab or pluck sound is there, but it doesn't have that atmospheric quality. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're actually going to apply reverb to it directly. And we're just going to use the same reverb unit on all of these examples here. And that way you're going to get some continuity from one to the next. Okay, that way you know exactly what we're doing. So before we even change anything, just using the default setting, let's listen to how this has affected the sound here. And actually, without changing much, this is pretty spot on to what dub techno reverb is going to due to this type of a synth. It's great. It's a lush, wonderful thing. Okay, now of course you can go in and you can do something other than just using the default patch. You can get into some more thing, maybe some spring. What a rack mount spring reverb. What does that sound like on this? Okay, now you just heard me ask. Now what does that sound like? Okay, now what we've done up to this point is what the large majority of people out there are doing. They find a reverb that sounds pretty all right with their sound. I think most of us would agree that the first one actually sounded a little bit more natural for this type of sound. But what does the reverb actually sound like? Okay, now this gets us to probably the most important part of this lesson, is what the heck does reverb sound like? And now reverb plugins are going to have the option, and hardware components are going to have the option to manage your dry and wet mix. Okay, on this particular plugin called Sound Designer, again, this is a Logic Pro plugin. It comes stock with the DAW. It actually says Rev, which stands for reverb, okay, instead of wet. Okay, it's the same exact thing. So if you want to hear what this reverb actually sounds like, turn down the dry all the way. Okay, and you'll see that it actually says mute once it's down to 0. So now we'll listen to it. Okay, so there's like a little bit of a squelchy type of a thing here. Now, if we go back to the original default, okay, so here's our factory default, and we'll just turn off our dry signal altogether. We'll turn up our wet here so you can hear it. Okay, so it has a lot less of the that kind of high-end squelchy effect that was coming through in the other one, but it's also very heavy on the low end, and that's going to cause some issues in the mix. So let's take some of that out and listen to it again. Okay, now again, this isn't a lesson on how to set up reverb for every type of sound in the world or anything. So we'll try and keep this moving along. Quickly dial this in. Okay, so that's actually pretty good. Just a touch of resonance here. Okay, so that's pretty good. What we'll do is we'll just kind of bring this down, and we'll bring our dry signal back up and listen to this and add our reverb in at the right amount here. Okay, and again, this is what it sounded like without it. Okay, and with it. Right, so it kind of gives you an idea of just how much you can transform a sound and affect the original delivery of the sound, the actual integrity of the sound when you're applying reverb directly. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll mute that track. Now, the second example we're going to use is just a single spoken word. Okay, the word incredible sounds like this.
Incredible.
Okay. So what we don't want to do is apply reverb directly to this one, because we need to protect that integrity of the sound. We need to protect the delivery of that sound. We don't want to wash that out in any way. It's got really nice enunciation.
Incredible. Incredible.
And if we take away any of that sharpness or enunciation from this sample, it's just going to get crummy. It's going to lead to a more muddled kind of sounding sample. So what we're going to do instead is, while the track is selected, we're just going to send this to a bus. Okay, so we'll send that at full signal strength, and we'll just go ahead and we'll grab the same exact reverb unit we were using before. And for this one, we'll probably just use a plate of some kind, but you'll notice that the dry signal, by default, when loaded on an auxiliary channel, when you're sending a signal to this on an auxiliary channel, Logic is smart enough to know that it shouldn't have any dry signal up, and that is brilliant. It's one of the tiny little things that I love about one of the many tiny little things that I love about this DAW. Okay, this program is pretty intelligent in the ways of workflows. Okay, so with the dry all the way down, all we're hearing is wet. So the very first thing we need to do when we're working with applying reverb in a parallel fashion is solo the auxiliary channel. Listen to it. Okay, so that's a pretty big cavernous type of reverb, and we don't really want that. So what we should do is move down to small spaces, and we'll probably just grab a plate reverb here, and we'll just grab the smallest one here. Because again, we're not looking to make this into, you know, a dub techno effect. We're looking to just slightly enhance or breathe a little bit of life into the word incredible here.
Incredible.
That's pretty good. Let's turn this up so you can hear this a little bit better.
Incredible. Incredible.
Now I'm going to take down just some of the low end again to avoid that muddiness issue.
Incredible. Incredible. Incredible.
Okay, we want to keep it kind of crisp. We don't want it to sound like he was in a big empty lecture hall or anything like that. Sound a little odd.
Incredible. Incredible.
Okay. I think that's pretty fair.
Incredible. 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 Incredible.
Okay, that sounds pretty darn good. So now what we need to do is, and we can leave the reverb, the wet signal up like that. That's fine. Oh, let me turn this up here for you more so you can hear this.
Incredible. Incredible.
Sorry, I did not realize the auxiliary channel was down. So we'll just go ahead and we'll dial this down nearly to the bottom, and we're going to unsolo this. So now we're listening to the original sample and the reverb applied.
Incredible. Incredible. Incredible.
And as you can see,
Incredible.
it doesn't take much to enhance it. Let's listen to it again, and after a couple times, I'll mute it so you can hear what the original sounded like.
Incredible. 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 Incredible.
Okay, so the word incredible itself is still incredibly crisp and present right in the center of that mix. And then you've got just a little bit of life, you know, just a little bit of reverberation happening on the edges there.
Incredible. Incredible.
Now, you're not going to accomplish that with serial or inline reverb. Okay, you're just not. Let's move on to the next example. And that is going to be this violin arrangement here. Okay, so it sounds fine. I mean, the playing is fine, but it sounds incredibly, maybe choked is a good word for it. It just has no breath, okay, no real life. So let's change that. Again, we are not going to apply it directly to this, and that's because we need to hear that delicious texture that comes off of the rosin bow and the sound moving around the body of the violin. We want to capture those things. We want to enhance those things. We do not want to wash those things out. And again, you're going to get more of a washed out sound with the serial processing and reverb, so or applications. So we'll just go ahead and we'll send this out again to an auxiliary channel, and we'll just use the same one, and we will load up our reverb here really quick. Now on this one, let's do probably a small space again. Empty chamber, maybe. Let's listen to this one, see what it sounds like. And again, Logic knew not to have any of the dry signal added to this, so we'll go ahead and we'll solo our auxiliary channel and hear what it sounds like. That's actually pretty decent. Let's see if there's another one in that area here. I think I like the other one a little bit more. And again, we don't need to spend all day on this, so we'll just pick one and move ahead. Again, we'll cut out some of the lows. There's not a whole lot there, but we just want to make sure that we're not bogging down our sound here. Okay, so now all we need to do is bring down our auxiliary volume here and play this back together with the original volume, or with the original violin. Okay, now you can hear both quite clearly, the reverberation and the original sound. You can hear the bow on the strings. It's great. Let's listen to it again with the reverb, and then I'll mute it so you can hear the difference. Without reverb. And again with it. And without. And with. Okay, so this is another good example of a type of sound that you would want to protect. If you want to add reverb to it to breathe a little life into it, that's great, that's fine, just do it in a parallel fashion. Any sound that you don't need to actually protect and that you want to transform in some way, go ahead and apply the reverb directly to it and see what happens. But here's the kicker, you gotta listen to just the wet signal before you call it good and actually apply it and move on to your next task, because it's just going to be so much better. You know, you start applying things without actually knowing what they sound like, and you don't actually know how they're affecting things. And then next thing you know, you wonder why you have a muddy mix, or why things aren't sounding very powerful anymore, or why maybe your vocals seem a little washed out or something. So yeah, we hope that explains clearly in a way that you can understand the different ways that you can apply reverb and when you want to use those different types of reverb. And of course, the paramount lesson of the day, what does reverb sound like? And you're never going to really know what your reverb sounds like from one sound to the next until you actually listen to just the wet signal. All right? So if you take away nothing else from this lesson, turn off your dry signal, that is. All right. Thanks for tuning in, folks. And we hope that you can start putting this to use in your very next project. We'll see you again soon. Cheers.